yeah, today's video is going to be a little different, as you can probably already tell, but I thought it might be an interesting one for many of you out there nonetheless, because I recently sat down to have a chat with Jason Schreier, who's a well-recognized journalist in the world of video games, and he just released a book called Play Nice: The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. And most of you will know Blizzard makes Hearthstone, which is really what kicked off this channel, me playing Hearthstone for 7 or 8 years, I think, before more recently moving into Marvel Snap. And I know many of you are Hearthstone transplants who probably have some negative emotions about Blizzard or Hearthstone, because there has certainly been a lot of things go wrong in the world of Blizzard over the last 10 plus years or so. And many of you probably feel like Hearthstone has had some mistakes and missteps throughout the years as well. And I thought we might be able to talk to Jason and get his perspective as someone who spent years researching this book and talking to a ton of insiders and really getting the full story of the kind of corporate influences at play inside Blizzard. Thought talking to him might offer some really cool insights, and I think it did. I think there's going to be a few things in this video you find really interesting, perhaps rather cathartic, hearing some things maybe you always suspected about Blizzard and Hearthstone, and some things that might surprise you as well. In particular, even if you're a Marvel Snap person and not a Hearthstone person, we're going to talk a lot about Ben Brode, because he launched Hearthstone, left Blizzard, and then went and launched Marvel Snap with Second Dinner. And Jason spent a lot of time talking to Ben Brode and had some fun stories and anecdotes about both the Blizzard side and the Marvel Snap side of Brode's experience. So something here for Blizzard people for sure, and Hearthstone people, and a little bit I think for Marvel Snap folks as well. And just speaking generally, Jason sent me the book to read a couple weeks early, so I've read the book. I thought it was awesome. It was a nice kind of both personal and business perspective on the side of Blizzard, really from day one, like way back in the 90s when things were kicking off, all the way up to basically about 2020 or so. So for me, it was perfect. You know, as somebody who's been so ingrained in the Blizzard world for so long, it was really cool to see that story unfold. There are definitely some more somber and negative aspects of the storyline. Of course, many of us will recall the sexual harassment scandals at Blizzard. Like, some of that is tough to read, but it's still important, and it's definitely a part of the story, and hopefully one that is behind Blizzard at this stage. But it's not just about that. It's also about, you know, various games getting created, all the kind of Bobby Kotick Activision influence on Blizzard, and a lot of different stories and quotes that I think you'll sometimes find enlightening and sometimes appalling and shocking as well. But a really good read nonetheless. So this is not like a sponsored video or anything. We're not paid to do this. I just thought it would be an interesting angle for you guys to get a look at this and have a chat straight from Jason himself, who did, you know, years of research and spent a lot of time putting all this together. So and talking to people at Blizzard, like a lot of insider interviews, which surprised me just how much access he seemed to have to the history of Blizzard. So that said, there is a link down in the description and stuff if you want to check out Jason's book. I think you can find it like bookstores, Amazon, and stuff as well. It's going to be a pretty popular book, I suspect. And that said, let's go ahead and jump into this little interview. Hey, Jason, and thanks for joining me.
Hello.
It's really an honor. Yeah, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. I feel like you just have all the best scoops and all the juicy stories, Blizzard or otherwise. So it's like you kind of almost single-handedly, I feel like, keep me in the loop in the video game world, because I'm usually so isolated to, like, you know, the 1 or 2 games that I play or stream, that it's nice to have somebody who keeps me up to date.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Regis. I wish I was more into Marvel Snap so we could just geek out about that. But it's just, I don't know. For some reason, I bounced off of it. I got into Hearthstone for a while when it launched, but Marvel Snap has just never hooked me. As much as I appreciate like how good it is, it's just like not personally for me. Otherwise, I would be like, let's get into it, man. Let's get into the. If you wanted to talk StarCraft 2, I could get granular on that all day. But
see, I was never good at RTS games. Like, I just don't have the APM or whatever. I just can't do it. It's probably a good thing though that you're not a Marvel Snap guy, because you would be far more bankrupt. It's very expensive sometimes, and you wouldn't have any time either, because I know it can soak a lot of people's time. That's it.
Yeah,
I'm playing
yeah.
the new Pokemon Pocket mobile game is maybe Snap 2.0 for like addictive gotcha pack opening card stuff. So I'm nervous. I'm like itching to get the new Charizard and Mewtwo and whatever else. So that said, of course we're here to talk about your book. So I've probably already raved in the intro about how much I enjoyed reading it, but I just wanted to get like in your own words, why should people check out your new book?
Yeah, sure. So this book, it's called Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. It comes out October 8th. I'm very, very excited about it. So I spent the past 3 years working on this thing. I've talked to about 350 people, including some 300 Blizzard employees, current and former employees, all of whom talked to me for this book, wanted to share their stories in some way or another. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. I don't think that like I think there have been bits and pieces of Blizzard's history kind of chronicled in different places over the years, but nobody has really put it all in one place together. And also the book is full of stories that have never been told before, and anecdotes and information that you have never seen on the internet before, even if you're the most hardcore of hardcore Blizzard fans. So I think it's going to be really appealing to people who are Hearthstone fans, who are Marvel Snap fans, because of course Marvel Snap, originated from Ben Brode and Hamilton Chu and their team, who are both covered extensively in the book. And on top of that, I think it's like a really interesting story from a business and culture standpoint, even if you don't care about Blizzard games. So it's the type of thing that like I'm hoping my mother will read it and enjoy it. I'm hoping the people who don't care about games. My wife liked it, and she doesn't really care about games. She's always my first reader, but she's a little biased. So I'm hoping that like it reaches. I guess my mom's a little biased too, I will say. But yeah, I'm hoping it reaches people even if they don't care about games, because it's such a good story and it has so many themes that I think are broadly applicable to not just the video game industry, but like any industry. Stories of creativity versus capitalism, or creativity versus predictability and business interests, and kind of the pursuit of never-ending growth, and what happens to a company when it gets a really, really big hit and that changes things, or cultural issues, boys club problems, what it's like working in male-dominated industries. There's so many big themes and questions that I think people will find interesting, even if they've never even picked up Warcraft or Starcraft or Diablo.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job in the book of like kind of mixing the overarching theme and the sort of corporate storyline, but still interspersed with the kind of personal side of it and the individual stories that lead through that, and kind of that trail that's laid out from really the day one of Blizzard, which I wasn't expecting. I thought this would really be more about like the modern era and some of the crazy fallout we've seen in the last like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah,
or so
it was originally just going to be about the modern era, and then as I started reporting and I started talking to people who were there in the early days, I realized there were so many interesting stories from there, and so many kind of themes that I feel like you have to go all the way back to really understand why Blizzard is what it is today and why it went through everything it went through. So yeah, I wound up going deeper on the past stuff than I actually expected when I first started working on the book.
Yeah, so I think like Hearthstone players in particular, which many Marvel Snap players in my audience in particular, because I started with Hearthstone, are former Hearthstone players who kind of feel burned by Blizzard in one way or another, because they think Hearthstone failed in some ways, or you know, a lot of them just like lost respect and kind of the admiration for Blizzard that they once had. I really think this book will feel cathartic in a lot of ways, because there's so many of these storylines and assumptions and speculations that people had, at least, you know, I've seen over the last like 10 years of doing this on YouTube, that nobody really ever knew for sure. Like, how influential is Activision? What's Bobby Kotick's deal? Like, you know, how money hungry is Blizzard? All of these sorts of conspiracies that you definitely don't want to like feed too much. And I try not to be like the YouTuber guy who's, you know, the drama guy or anything. I think I'm pretty good about that. I'm not feeding into
that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come on your show, is because you strike me as someone who's not one of the outrage, like performative guys who has angry takes on everything.
Yeah, I try to be as nuanced as possible. Like, basically, like every 6 months, I would do a video, kind of like a state of the game that was like, you know, honest and hard hitting, but still not like outraged at all. You know, nuanced, I think. But I think it'll be cathartic to see like some of those things were probably true, and a lot of people's assumptions were kind of happening in the back end, and also sometimes seeing maybe why. I think you had a good job kind of respecting the business side of it, and understanding that some of that almost had to happen in a way, but still, recognizing it wasn't always ideal for the players.
Yeah. I want to tell you guys an
first,
amazing story.
first.
I want to tell you an amazing story for your audience that your audience will really appreciate, I think. So a little bit of context here is that I won't get into the entire story, but basically because of a number of factors, Activision started getting more of an influence on Blizzard starting around 2013, but it really didn't trickle down until a few years later, like 2016, 2017, 2018. 2017 is really when things started ramping up, and there was this new CFO, Chief Financial Officer at Blizzard, who was really kind of Activision minded, let's say. And he brought in a bunch of people who were showing up at these meetings and being like, why isn't there more monetization? Why aren't we pushing people to buy card packs more often? Why aren't we doing more bundles and sales and discounts and all that other jazz? And it led to all sorts of fights between the finance people and the Hearthstone leadership team, and there were all sorts of arguments and all sorts of problems. But it really came to a head with a mode that I'm sure you remember well called Dungeon Run. And Dungeon Run came out at the end of 2017, I believe, or the fall of 2017. And it was very successful from a player standpoint. Players loved it. And players were really into it.
It's people still play it. It's fun.
Super cool, right? But from a monetization standpoint, I think some of the people who are maybe more finance minded could point to it and be like, hey, this is totally free and it's not pushing people to buy more card packs. Why are we doing this? Like, why did we waste our resources on this? Why aren't we doing things that are going to drive people to buy more stuff? And some of the Blizzard people are like, isn't our job to just make cool things? Because if we get people just playing the game, they will inevitably spend more money on it. We don't have to milk them for every penny. But the spreadsheets had to go up and to the right, and the numbers had to go up to please the finance people. And so Ben Brode, who you of course know as the face of Hearthstone for a long time, and Hamilton Chu, who is the executive producer of the game, they at a certain point they started talking about their plans to leave Blizzard and then go on to make Second Dinner, which would of course lead to Marvel Snap. And during these discussions, when they were planning on leaving Blizzard, they decided we're going to have a code word, like a code phrase. So like if we're in a room talking about like our plans and someone comes in and is like, hey, what are we talking about? We'll say this thing. And so their code phrase, Brode told me, was Dungeon Run monetization. And so if someone came into a room and the two of them were like talking about their plans to leave Blizzard and form Second Dinner and said, what are you talking about? They would be like, oh, we're just talking about Dungeon Run monetization, which I think is the funniest thing.
That was great in the book. I loved the notion that there's like secret meetings happening on Blizzard campus to talk about Marvel Snap. There's something a little shaky about that whole premise. Like maybe they shouldn't really be doing that on Blizzard campus, but at the same time, it's like
it wasn't like they were planning the game or anything. That's not exactly what it was. It's more like, all right, we're planning on leaving. Maybe we mentioned here and there. Oh, what are you talking about? Oh, Dungeon Run monetization. It's not like they were like designing Marvel Snap on Blizzard's campus. Like that was not happening.
They don't have like a paper version of the game on the table. They're like shuffling into their pockets as they say.
You know what's funny? I think he said this publicly. He told me that like after they left Blizzard, it took them like a few weeks, maybe even less, to actually design all of what would become Marvel Snap. And then they spent like 3 or 4 years working on just like the meta surrounding it, like the progression system and like exactly how the cubes would work and like all the stuff, like the ladder nature of it, like all the different like level, like everything around it. But the game itself was designed very, very early on, which I thought was really interesting.
It's honestly crazy. Yeah, he did a GDC talk actually showing some of the like paper the stuff they've done.
The complexity versus depth part of that talk is really interesting.
Yeah, the fact that they nailed it that fast, and it's so perfect. I still think Marvel Snap's gameplay is so perfect. I could say a lot about the sort of systems surrounding the game and so on, but the gameplay, it's just like, I just love it still to this day, even after playing it every day for many hours for many years. Yeah, that's a really cool story. I guess I don't know if this is something you can really speak to or not, but regarding Ben and Hamilton leaving the Hearthstone team, and I mean, frankly, they took a lot of people with them, as far as I could tell. I don't know all the details, but it seemed like it maybe didn't even happen all at once, but there was probably a bit of a trickle of people moving from Hearthstone to Marvel Snap. I'm wondering, did you get any insights into the team left behind? Like, was there any sort of like bad blood or just understanding even, like, I kind of get it. I can see, because I think in your book, there's this theme of people leaving Blizzard for greener pastures as more and more of a like Bobby Kotick and Activision influence happens over time.
That was the first domino, actually. They were like the first big name people to leave the company. I didn't get any sense. I don't know. I hadn't even asked anybody or thought about like whether there was kind of bad blood as a result of them leaving. I didn't get that sense. I think there are a couple of factors at play here. One is that it's actually kind of healthy for veteran people to leave sometimes, because it opens up new slots for fresh blood to come in. And so now there was a new director position open that someone else could take over, and I think that's good for the game and good for the team in general, for someone not to stay in that position for like 10 years. But and I also think that like a lot of people kind of understood why he left, because they could see what was going on with all of the Activision influence coming in. And there were a bunch of factors at play here. Like, everybody, when someone leaves a job, it's usually, especially like an established job where they were there for many, many years, there's always a few reasons there. And the other thing is, I asked a lot of people about Ben Brode, because I think he's a fascinating person and a fascinating character who I spotlighted in the book, in the Hearthstone chapter. And I think the most negative thing anyone would ever say about him is that his laugh is so loud that it could be annoying to try to get work done. In fact, actually, I heard a great story. Oh man, this is an exclusive for you, because this is not in the book.
Oh, cool.
Maybe it's in the book. I don't remember if this was like cut out of the final draft, but like one of the executives, I guess I could just say it. So Chris Metzen, I believe the story is that Chris Metzen was originally like sitting next to Brode, and Chris Metzen like either had his office moved or Brode's office moved, because he just couldn't deal with listening to him laughing all day. That's the most negative thing that people could say about Brode, is that his laugh was annoying and loud. A lot of people love that guy. He's so charismatic, and like really, I think a lot of people have fun working with him and enjoy his leadership and appreciate that. So I didn't get the sense that there was a ton of bad blood, but of course I didn't talk to everyone on the Hearthstone team when he left, and this isn't something that I asked people about a lot, but that's certainly not something that I heard about.
Yeah, that's certainly believable. Fans love Brode too, right? Like, everybody always thought he was like the best face of Hearthstone. The man could sell card packs to anybody, basically.
I love that YouTube video.
So
there's a YouTube video that's just a cut of him laughing, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I never actually knew Ben, and even to this day, I still don't really know Ben. I kind of got involved with like the Blizzard team doing stuff, as a creator, right after Ben left. Like, I think it's just coincidental timing, and I honestly, despite being perhaps the most viewed Marvel Snap YouTuber, depending on the day, I really am not that involved with the Marvel Snap team either. It just hasn't really ever lined up, and they're so busy doing stuff. It's okay. So I don't really know Ben, but when I came into the scene, everybody said, because I started doing Hearthstone stuff, making appearances on official streams and hosting Carterville streams and stuff, everybody thought I was a replacement for Ben Brode, because I kind of vaguely look like Ben.
I
with
can
glasses,
see it. I can see it.
and I kind of laugh, not quite as loud as Ben, but I kind of have that same laughy type demeanor. And they were like, "Who's this scuffed Ben Brode? Who's this replacement Ben Brode?" So I've always had this kind of chip on my shoulder, like, "Oh man, I'm just the worst version of Ben."
Amazing. Bargain bin Ben Brode over here.
Yeah, exactly, the bargain Ben. I can't. And my name's Regis Kill Ben too, so the bargain Ben or something nice. There. So earlier you mentioned like 2017 was the timeline for Dungeon Run. I think a lot of people would kind of consider that Hearthstone's like peak year. As far as like, I think it was probably a peak year for popularity from what I can see on my end, like YouTube metrics. And of course it doesn't extrapolate 1-to-1 or anything, but you kind of see the trends and see ideas, and probably peak year from like a gameplay experience too. That's one of the like most nostalgic, beloved years of Hearthstone. I'm just curious if we could tie this into the Bobby Kotick thread a little bit, the CEO of Activision Blizzard. Like, what did Bobby think about Hearthstone? Like, I guess initially, like, you know, in the creation phase, but also financially, like, was it a success? Did he care about the game? Was it a big deal? Because nowadays, like, we don't see Hearthstone mentioned in any of the like financially quarterly reports, anything like that. Like, Hearthstone seems like it's just kind of been molded into the Warcraft brand and more or less just kind of forgotten about off to the side of the company, but we don't really know if it's considered a hit, a success at any of that level at any time. I'm curious if you got those insights.
Yeah, I don't know how Blizzard sees it now. I do know. So, okay, starting from the beginning, I think in the early days of the project, it was such a small team. It was about 15 people. It was almost canceled like 3 times. At one point, they lost most of their team to help out on StarCraft 2, getting that out the door, which actually turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to the project, because like it gave Brode and Eric Dodds the opportunity to just like sit and do paper prototypes for 9 months, just designing the entire game on paper, which was actually really good for the game and the project. It almost got canceled multiple times. There was pressure from Activision executives, from Blizzard executives, just being like, why are we working on this like silly little card game thing when those people could be working on World of Warcraft, which is making us hundreds of millions of dollars and like needs more people to make expansions more quickly? Because that was always a big running point of tension between Activision and Blizzard, especially. Like, why couldn't Blizzard make more WoW expansions more quickly? And so I think Kotick would have been fine canceling it. I don't think it was too much on his radar because it was so small, a team. And then it came out in 2014, and it was much bigger than anyone expected. And it would go on to reach, I think, 100 million players. So it was a massive hit, I would say. And that's when, yeah, Kotick was very interested and very, very happy with it as a hit. I think that the pressures on the game would start a couple years later. And what happened was the CFO that I mentioned earlier that Blizzard brought in, he was kind of pushed on them by Activision. And he brought with him this kind of philosophy of like hitting numbers and meeting quarterly targets. And there was a lot of pressure on the Hearthstone team. Every time they would hit the numbers, they would just get bigger and bigger every single quarter, every single year. And there were a lot of arguments over how to do that, especially surrounding bundles and discounts and when to push like packs and stuff like that. And something that you guys need to know is that this guy, the CFO, his name is Armin Zerza. He came from a company called Procter and Gamble, which is best known as the company behind like Dove soap and like laundry detergent and stuff like that. So his experience is in product goods and shipping product goods, and that's how he operates. And so he brought that kind of business philosophy to Blizzard, which really doesn't fit with a company that makes video games. And so it was a very awkward fit and led to a lot of different problems. I think the bundles and the discounts is a good one because that was always just an ongoing point of contention. Hamilton Chu, who was the executive producer of the Hearthstone team, was like very anti-bundle because he thought that stuff like that, promos and discounts and bundles, stuff like that, would devalue card packs. And it's kind of like one guy who I quote in the book gave me this really great analogy, and it's like he's like it's kind of like Costco versus like Walmart. Like you go to Walmart, you see things on sale, you're like, oh, well, this is on sale, 30% off. I'm only going to buy things when they're on sale. Like why would I ever buy something at full price? Versus Costco, you go there, there's no sales, but everything feels fairly priced. And so you get it, just kind of, you leave there feeling good. You don't feel like you got milked for all your money or anything like that. And I think it's like a totally different philosophy for like approaching monetization that really was just an ongoing sore spot along the way. And I think Hearthstone players could see some of the monetization getting worse over time. And I think that is largely the result of just pressures from the finance team and from this new CFO. And yes, it is as people feared. Activision was creeping in. Although it wasn't, I think people kind of, it's very easy to assume that it's like Bobby Kotick like coming like parachuting down and like flying in on his private jet and
like Warzone,
yeah, right, and joining the Hearthstone meetings. But no, it's a lot more subtle than that, and it's a lot kind of the pressures are a lot more complicated than that, I would say.
Yeah, I got a sense reading the book. It was almost more like erosion over time. You know, there was maybe no like one defining moment, but just little chips here and there, and suddenly you've got a different picture 5,
It's more
7 years
subtle
is
and
down the line.
complicated than I think people realize. Yeah, because it's not like Bobby is ever going around. Like his whole big thing is like wanting Blizzard to like. Mostly it was all about WoW expansions. That was like his biggest concern, like wanting to release WoW expansions more quickly because he thinks he would say that Blizzard is disappointing players, letting players down by not releasing stuff more quickly. Because remember, Bobby Kotick, he comes from this world, and I get into this pretty extensively in the book. But he comes from he led his company Activision out of bankruptcy and like transformed it into one of the biggest publishers in gaming by taking this approach to games that I think a lot of gamers kind of hate. It's this approach of like you take a hit franchise and then you release it every single year, even if it kills the franchise within a few years. Guitar Hero is a good example of that. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is a good example of that. Those are franchises that were like hits and then got sequels every single year and eventually just died out because you can't keep up quality when you're releasing a new game every year. And it worked for Call of Duty. Call of Duty is the only franchise that has worked for in Bobby Kotick's stable. I think that that became a big point of tension among the Blizzard people.
Yeah, I really hate to say this, but after reading the book, I came away with a little bit more like understanding or appreciation for Bobby Kotick than I expected. Not it didn't like turn me 100%, you know, like I still I think there's a lot of negative influence, but you kind of saw the sort of business acumen behind it, I guess. Like you understood the logic, even if you didn't always agree with it. And I think there were a few moments you offered, like redemption's not the right word, but like you painted the picture that he really wasn't meddling all that much, and like he kind of had moments where he backed off a little bit and was like, okay, yeah, I understand, like you guys do your thing. I kind of trust the process a little bit. So
things change over time. I want to make that clear. And yes, I mean, I believe very strongly as a journalist that like I don't believe in heroes and villains and like kind of simplified narratives. I believe that everything is complex and that human beings, like I think if I'm going to tell a story about people and someone like Bobby Kotick is one of the main characters, I want to really understand his perspective and present it as in as fair and nuanced a way as possible. And I think a lot of people will come away from the book thinking exactly what you just thought, where it's like, I don't know if I like Bobby Kotick, but I certainly understand. Right. That's what I want. I want more understanding of where he was coming from and why he was doing what he was doing. And I think people will understand that like it's all about money for him, and that makes sense. And here's why, and here's what that looked like, and here's what he was thinking. And I think people will still be mad about the fact that for him it's all about money and not about players and games and stuff like quality and art and entertainment. I think they'll have a little more understanding into his insight. But to get at what I was saying earlier, so I would say it really changed over time. In 2018, one of the big turning point for Blizzard's history was in 2018 when Mike Morhaime, who was the CEO and co-founder, stepped down. And at that point, Bobby Kotick was able to meddle a lot more than he had before, because Morhaime he had a lot more leverage and clout when it came to like shielding Blizzard and protecting Blizzard's kind of self-proclaimed values and kind of making sure that Blizzard could stay autonomous in certain ways, for better and for worse. And you can make arguments in either direction there, that or like even both. And when he was gone, this guy, J. Allen Brack, took over. He was the executive producer of WoW and then went on to become the president. He had way less leverage than Morhaime did and could not like fight the same fights and win those battles. And from 2018 on, I think you saw a lot more interference, a lot more Activision in there. And I think you could probably see that in the games as well. I think you could see that manifesting in some of the games and what they looked like in the subsequent years. That's not to say they were bad necessarily, but like you saw a lot more focus on monetization than you did in the past.
Yeah, I think Hearthstone has had a fairly stable lifespan in a lot of ways. Like it's got a really nice rhythm with expansions, and it's harder to notice some of those trends because there's just always new content and always new stuff. Yeah. I'm sure the World of Warcraft audience feels like they see this a lot more directly than perhaps Hearthstone players do, this kind of timeline unfolding. Yeah. So, on the Bobby Kotick note, I just want to clarify, like, I understand him as a business person. Uh-huh. Clearly, when it comes to the Blizzard harassment lawsuit and the fallout there's obviously a lot of things about Bobby Kotick that we read that are just still despicable, right? Let's be clear. I just want to make sure I don't paint too rosy of a picture on that. Like that clearly later in the book, as you get into that, like there's just some shocking and just horrific things to read about the. Well, I mean, do you just want to get into that a little bit? Sure. I know it's a more somber topic, but it's just, some of it's just tough to read and see. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the sexual misconduct and harassment that was going on at Blizzard, I mean, it's hard to point the finger at Bobby for some of that stuff. A lot of that stuff was happening before he took over. A lot of that stuff was happening just kind of internally at Blizzard, had nothing to do with Activision getting in there and influencing things. And really, I mean, the book kind of, it talks about Blizzard's cultural evolution from the very beginning, because it started off as a place where it was almost entirely men, probably 95% men. And then as it grew more professionalized, like in the early 2000s, it hired more women, but was still male dominated and still almost entirely men in leadership roles. And that can cause some problems that are subtle and systemic. But like, if you're a woman at Blizzard and you're the only person in a room, the only woman in a room full of men, and you say something and it gets ignored, or like someone says your idea is bad, or like you want a promotion and you don't get it, you always have this kind of like, there's always this undercurrent of like, is it me? Is it the idea? Or is it because I'm the only woman in the room and these dudes all like go to strip clubs together on the weekends and I'm not part of that boys club? Like that is always going to be there. And that is such a subtle systemic problem that is really hard to fix for a company like Blizzard, where like so much of it is so ingrained and so many of the men who are at the top have been there for 20-25 years and experience is so valued, and it's really complicated. And I try to get into that in the book. The other part of this I think is important is that for a lot of women, working at Blizzard was kind of this exercise in contradictions, in that it was both the best place in the world and the worst place in the world. And I interviewed a lot of women who told me that on one hand, they met some of their best friends in the world at Blizzard and had some of the best times in their lives, just kind of like making Blizzard games, playing Blizzard games, getting to be part of that campus and energy and just the culture, and they loved so much about it. And on the other hand, they would get sexually harassed, or they would find out that they were getting paid significantly less money than male colleagues who had the same amount of experience, or like all this other stuff that was just complete bullshit that like nobody should have to deal with at work. That it was really tough to deal with those two extremes. So yeah, I think it was really tough. It was really tough for a lot of women, and I'm glad that a lot of them were able to share their stories in the lawsuit, in the book, in public, on Twitter, like in the days following the lawsuit, or like on social media. So it's good to get this stuff out there, because that's how a company can kind of reckon with it and work to change it. At the same time, and here is where I get at my kind of the theme I keep hammering, which is that everything is more complicated and nuanced than it seems. The lawsuit itself is also full of sloppy and misleading accusations that turn out to be not true. And there's some things that I kind of get into in the book that I debunk that really are just not true at all, and led to a lot of harm in some cases.
Yeah, there were various details of like, well, sloppiness, like literal typos you mentioned, but also like not kind of differentiating amongst the teams at Blizzard and so on. It's all tough to read for various reasons. I mean, I think we're hopeful that Blizzard has started to turn things around. It seems like it, from what I've heard at least. So that's the one kind of the positive there. You know, I think a lot of people have this sort of notion of like the glory days of Blizzard, and Blizzard used to be, you know, the shining icon, the beacon of game developers. And I found myself, especially in the early part of your book, as you go through that initial history, like, was Blizzard ever actually a good company? I think they definitely made good games early on. That's pretty indisputable. But there's just so many harrowing stories, even in those early days. Like you mentioned, just like going to strip clubs after work. Yeah. That to me is just, I just like can't even fathom that. I'll be honest, I've never really had a real job or worked in a corporate environment. So all of this is a little bit nebulous to me. I don't know It certainly
It's
sounds
not
like none of
normal.
it's
It's not
acceptable.
normal.
Okay.
I'll tell you that. I mean,
Yeah.
look, okay, so was it a good company? I mean, it depends who you were, right? If like you were a dude who worked at Blizzard in the 90s and like you got to go to work and like you show up in your shorts and your flip-flops instead of like a suit or like khakis or whatever, and you get to work on video games all day, and then when you're done working on video games, you hang out with your best friends who work with you and like you all play games together. Like it's like friggin' paradise for a lot of people, especially when you're in your 20s. And that's the thing to remember about a lot of the people in the 90s who were there, is that they were all very young, and that's the reason. Like going to strip clubs with your work buddies is like it's always going to be, it's always a little unusual, I'll say that, but different, feels different in your 20s than it does like when you're older and you have a family or something like that. So again, all content contextual here, right? But then again, if you're a woman who comes there in the 90s, like you have to deal with this boys club and you have to either tolerate it or like get out, and that kind of sucks. So it depends who you were, is the answer to, is this a good company? A lot of people have a lot of fond memories of that place and loved working there, even despite the ugliness of it all, right? It's like I said before with this contradiction. Here, I'll give you another good example. There's this one woman I was talking to, and she said to me, working at most companies, it's kind of like a series of like average days. Like every day is a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10. Working at Blizzard, a lot of days are 10 out of 10s, and then there's some days that are 0 out of 10s. It's an exercise in extremes, and that's the kind of place Blizzard was. It was the type of place where like a lot of people loved so much about it, and then there were some parts that were just so ugly and like intolerable and that nobody should have had to deal with. So it's hard to kind of like sum it up as good or bad, because it's so like both. Like that's what people would say, right? Especially the women who work there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women who work there would say it was both good and bad. And then the other complication here, again, nuance, complication, complexity. The other complication here is that like I think for some people, what was fun when they actually worked at Blizzard, they might look back now and be like, oh, that kind of sucked, or like, oh god, we were such idiots, we didn't know what we were doing, we would not do that again if we got the chance to repeat it today. But it is what it is. So yeah, I mean, again, it's just all so complicated, but in general, I think that it was just a place that like I think meant a lot to a lot of people, and in many ways was really great for a lot of people, and in many ways was really bad for a lot of people.
Yeah, I have to say, by the way, I really respect your precision and nuance as a journalist. This is going to be on YouTube, though. We need clickbait and extremism.
Should I make the face? Should I make the face that you're gonna put in the YouTube thumbnail? I'm gonna do the
faces.
like Blizzard.
That's the screenshot. That may be the first face I use. I almost never do. I never do faces and thumbnails, which tells you a lot already. So you kind of mentioned the 0 to 10 days and the 10 out of 10 days to change that into a different context. I feel like from a game development standpoint, there's a lot of 10 out of 10 games at Blizzard are very close, right? A lot of great games. I was surprised though how many canceled games and projects I had never heard about that were in your book. It's like an endless list. There's probably like 5 or 6 games I'd never heard of. Like I think you teased like basically a Warcraft God of War, which like that is the greatest thing I've ever heard. I would do anything to play that game. Could you shed any light on some of those canceled projects? I mean, Titan is the most famous among them all, but that was just scraping the surface.
Titan gets a whole chapter in the book. Yeah, there are a lot of them. And yeah, like I said, I think that like when I set out to do this book, I was like, if this book doesn't have new information that is not on the internet that nobody's heard of before, there's no point in me doing it. So like part of the value of this book is that it's like bringing a lot of new stuff to the table, and even hardcore Blizzard fans who have followed every single like headline over the last 30 years of the company, I think will find that there's a lot of new stuff in here. And yeah, one of those is canceled games. There were a lot that stood out to me as really interesting. One of the ones that I heard the most good stuff about was this game called Avalon. Avalon was the code name of it, and it was Blizzard's take on Minecraft. It was Minecraft set in the Warcraft universe, although it was a little bit more like it sounded to me a little bit more like Dragon Quest Builders. I don't know if you've ever played that, but it's kind of like,
Oh, I don't think I know that.
oh, it's a great game. It's kind of like it's Minecraft, but with a
I'm
Dragon
Googling.
Quest skin and like story and quests. It's more of kind of a guided Minecraft with like a real story and quests and stuff like that. And so that was that people who played it thought it sounded really cool, or thought it was really fun, and I thought it sounded really cool. The game you're referring to, yeah, that was canceled a few years ago. That was being led by this guy, Alex Afrasiabi, who was accused by many women of sexual misconduct. And let me think. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, Titan gets a chapter. That's a big one. A lot of mobile games got canceled. There was like Orbis, which was like Warcraft, Pokemon Go. There was Odyssey I dive into. That was the survival game that was canceled actually earlier this year when Microsoft took over. That was canceled. Yeah, lots of good stuff in there.
Do you know if there was anything Hearthstone related? This might be a little too in the weeds, like individual projects within Hearthstone that were canceled. There was a long touted kind of like tournament mode we'd heard about a little bit that got canceled many years ago, but I didn't know if you had anything, any juicy Hearthstone nuggets there.
No, nothing I can think of. One thing I actually didn't include in the book was just kind of stories about Hearthstone Battlegrounds. It just didn't wind up fitting into the overall story, which I just thought was kind of an interesting little spin-off thing. No, nothing that I can think of, or that I heard of at least.
Yeah, on the note of Battlegrounds, like smash hit as far as we can tell, right? Like tons of people love it, tons of people play it. The story of its creation has been, you know, they've done videos and stuff, and I've talked about it a lot too. It's really cool.
That's one of the reasons that I kind of I didn't include it in the book, because
yeah.
it's kind of been pretty well documented, and it just didn't fit in the story.
Super grassroots, like just, you know, passion-based project, which is those often I feel like lead into the best results. I am wondering, did you ever hear anything about Battlegrounds' sort of financial impact on Hearthstone? Because I always sense this fear with Battlegrounds that it's totally free to play. You really don't need to spend any money at all to have fun at Battlegrounds. They've tried to add some monetization aspects that don't seem particularly successful, as far as we can tell anyway. Was there any like fear or actual results that it negatively impacted Hearthstone financially? Is that something you'd heard?
I have not heard anything about it that I can remember. Sorry to say.
No, it's okay.
After this call, I'll see if I have time to go through my notes and see like if anyone mentioned anything about it, but nothing that comes to mind, and certainly not something I put in the book.
Yeah, it always felt like a balance between, like, you know, you want players and you need to monetize them, and Battlegrounds seems like it almost captures that to a T, to an extent. Like, it brings in a lot of players, but how well do you actually monetize them? I think
it's a big question. Well, that was the question around Dungeon Run that I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer any of these questions, but I thought we might ask a little bit about Marvel Snap, because people are gonna be mad at me if I don't ask.
I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah, and it's just a couple quick things, nothing crazy. I and just even like generally, do you have any other fun insights?
A couple of thoughts. One is that I don't know how widely known this is. It might be widely known, but one of the reasons that this even came together is that while he was still at Blizzard, Hamilton Chu got a call from this guy named Jay Ang, who is at Marvel, and he runs like the games division at Marvel, and he used to work at Blizzard, so he knew Hamilton from there. And he was like, "Hey, if you like start your own thing, I'll hook you up with this Marvel license. We can work together." And that was like the inciting factor behind them leaving to start Second Dinner, was that they already had the Marvel license in place, which is a pretty good catalyst for leaving and starting your own thing, because there's a lot less risk to going and starting a new company when you have this like hit franchise behind you. So that was a big impetus behind this all happening, is like for people who wonder, it's not like they pitched a card game and then figured Marvel would be a good fit. Like, Marvel was in there from the very beginning, before the company was even started. One other thing that I just found really interesting is that Broad, I was talking to him about like moving from Blizzard to a new company and the transitions that involved, and he was like, Yeah, it's so interesting. Suddenly, I'm thinking about all these things that I would never have to think about at Blizzard, like the average revenue per player, and like lifetime value, and all these other things that you have to think about when you're running your own company. And it's suddenly like, I don't know if they can necessarily like relate to all those finance people who are harassing them at Blizzard and who are like suddenly in the meetings and like pushing all the money stuff. But certainly has to give people a new perspective if they're just used to the Blizzard world. Because one thing you have to remember, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but one thing you have to remember about Blizzard's culture is that for a very long time, it was seen as anathema to mention money in a development meeting. Like, you don't do it. This doesn't happen at Blizzard. If you're designers and artists and programmers, you are just talking about the work. You are not talking about money. And for Hearthstone, that was very easy for a long time because they had this very obvious monetization model, which is you sell card packs. Like, duh, like it's perfect. It fits perfectly. For some of the other free-to-play games, that was a little harder because like you have to kind of build free-to-play with monetization in mind. And for Marvel Snap, that was something they had to think about from the beginning because it's a lot more complicated just because of the nature of what Marvel Snap is. It's a lot more complicated to figure out how to monetize it. It's not a clear-cut thing where like you are just like playing decks normal. Like it's not like Hearthstone. Hearthstone is a little bit easier because it's a lot more like Magic the Gathering. So yeah, it's interesting to hear them talk about like a new perspective starting their own company. And sometimes you kind of realize like, oh, Blizzard was kind of this fairy tale land where you could just think about design challenges without ever having to worry about monetization. And this is the real world where you actually do have to worry about that sort of thing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, some would say Marvel Snap still hasn't really figured out the
I was
monetization
gonna
side
say,
of things.
yeah, I don't know what it's like now, but I've definitely heard that sentiment. I remember hearing that sentiment. I remember seeing them have to really struggle with balancing, like Nexuses, was it, or like wasn't
Nexus events, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I wish I knew Marvel Snap better, but I do not.
It's an ongoing battle.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me.
I only say that with a little bit of ire, but it's it seems like they still haven't quite mastered it. That's the game's making. I think it's like $100 million or something.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
right now,
I mean,
so I
it's
don't
so
think they're
tough,
too
man.
mad.
It's so tough for a game like this because, like Marvel Snap, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, it feels like a card game that's really unlike any other card game on the market. So it's hard to really know. Like I said, Hearthstone, it's a very easy translation of like Hearthstone is like Magic. You just buy card packs, you get new cards, you collect them. Like it's very easy to make that monetization work. Whereas Marvel Snap, because it's so different, it just feels a lot tougher, right? Am I wrong there? Like, does that sound right to you?
No, I think that's fair. They don't do traditional card packs. It's not like the loot box model as such. So it's like more about trying to model it to a progression track and system, right. And it's a lot more complicated mathematically, I think, because it's just like figuring out the timelines and player commitments and how much are people earning naturally versus, you know, it's just, I totally sympathize with how difficult it is with the model that they've chosen. And still we wish it were better, right, as players, but I think people are frustrated, but perhaps understanding. So
I think it helps.
A cool story,
I just want to say real quick, I think it helps that like Broad is just so open and transparent, and like I think he really means it when he like shares updates and talks about the game, and like you can tell that he really cares. And that's something that I think is like a big Blizzard value, is just like people from the very top are really, even some of them are more open than others, or more like public than others, but I think it's always been a value of Blizzard that like from the very top, people need to really love games and care about games. And I think that's something that like for the most part is still there to this day. Hopefully, I don't know, I mean, I haven't gone around asking every single person if they care about games, but it feels like that was always just kind of like in the culture of Blizzard, and I think that was one of the things that really contributed to their success.
Yeah, I see that still in Hearthstone today. You know, I'm not as much of a Hearthstone player. I still play regularly, but I don't do quite as much. But you can still feel the love, and I still know a ton of the dev team too, and they're always so proud of what they make. And even if you don't always fall in love with it yourself, you can feel the passion. And I think absolutely there are still a lot of people who love making games in Marvel Snap and at Blizzard as well. So that's a nice positive spot to wrap up the Blizzard discussion. Nice. But before I let you go, real quickly, what's next for you? You just put out a book, or by the time you watch this, let's say you just put out a book, and everybody's gonna go buy your book, and that's gonna be a huge success.
Oh, thank you.
So I can sense it. It's gonna be a hit. What's next for Jason though?
I don't know. I mean, I still have my day job full time at Bloomberg. I'm about to go on a book tour and do some Bloomberg stuff as well. So the next
Oh,
couple of weeks, I'm going to be traveling. Going to be in like LA and San Francisco. And then I'm still doing. I mean, I have a podcast that people should check out, the Triple Click Podcast. We talk about games every week. And then yeah, I don't know if I'm going to write another book. I guess we'll see. I'm still trying to figure out what I want my next like book project to be. But certainly staying Bloomberg.
oh, Jason, I'm losing you a little bit here. Not during your call to action, Jason. No. Uh-oh. I'm losing your call. No.
And can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, you're back. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Bad timing.
How
Yeah,
much of
I
that
think
did
you're
you
good.
get? Do you want me to do another take?
Maybe it seems important. Yeah, let
Okay.
me just cue you up real quick. That was a nice positive note to end on, but I'm just curious, what's next for you? Where can we find your stuff? How can we buy the book? All those goodies. I want to hear it
Yeah,
all.
so Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. It's coming out. It's hardcover, digital, audiobook if you're more into listening, which I know a lot of folks on YouTube are. You can listen to the book while you play Marvel Snap or while you play like the new Diablo 4 expansion, which is coming out the same day as my book. Yeah,
Ooh.
and then I'm you can find my stuff at Bloomberg. I'm still working there full time. You can find me also on my podcast Triple Click, which everybody should check out if you're into games. And yeah, I'm gonna try to figure out what the next big thing is after Play Nice in terms of books. But for now, check out Play Nice. Hopefully people dig it. I think it'll resonate with a lot of people out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to see what people think of the book. I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit. I know I really enjoyed it, so I'm sure especially Blizzard fans will find a lot to enjoy on this one. Cathartic stuff, funny stuff, just interesting stories, shocking stories. It's basically got it all. So I'll of course include some handy links down in the description and pinned comments
Awesome.
for people to find the book and support you. So I just want to thank you for your time. That was awesome and enlightening, and it's been great to meet you. And as a fan, it's been an honor.
Thank you so much, Regis. I really appreciate that.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, there you go. That wraps it up. I'm not somebody who does interviews often, so I hope that went okay. I'm not well versed in the world of interviewing, but I think it went all right. So I'm curious. What did you guys all think about that? What did you take away from that chat? What do you think about Hearthstone? What do you think about Blizzard? What do you think about Ben Brode and Marvel Snap and so on? Share all those thoughts down in the comments below. Again, if this sounds interesting to you, we just barely scratched the surface of Jason's book. So you can find links down in the description if you want to check out his book, Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. And that said, thanks to Jason for spending some time with me, and thanks to you for watching this video.